Thank you, Mary, and thank you to our guests this afternoon for participating to this talk. We have Giovanni Carmine, who is director at the Kunst St. Gallen, and Gina Folly, who is an artist based here in Basel. So we'll talk this afternoon about the opportunities and chances that the young artists face when, starting their career. So the opportunities and the way also institutions and the different actors in the art system work towards supporting and promoting their work. I think I'd like to start talking about the role of institutions, and maybe Giovanni can start telling us the way working in a context like the Kunst, which is, of course, focusing on the promotion of the new, the research and the proposal is, in a way, already a way to support young emerging artists. But it's also part of the identity of the institution. So it's, in a way, a mutual service, no? On one side, helping artists, and on the other side, constructing the identity of the institution. It's interesting to know on your side how you work with the young emerging artists.
Good afternoon, everybody. Well, the Kunsthalle, like several other institutions, several other associations of spaces and so on that were born in that time, like in the mid of the 80s, like the Kunst St. Gallen in this case, were always here to show the work of not established artists, or artists which didn't made it into the museum. At that time, of course, was more difficult to get into a museum than today for not established artists or young artists. So it's kind of in the DNA of the institution like the Kunsthalle to work with younger or emerging artists. The definition of young artist is already something complicated, and I think maybe something that we could discuss about it. But yeah, it's part of the career of an artist or also from an institution to work with artists which the work is not yet totally understood and maybe comport some risks to show. And what we try to do is just like to give a completely open field with the most professional support as possible to young artists, and that's what maybe helps them to get even more professional, even better.
Gina, it would be interesting to know also the artist's point of view in this relationship. What do you feel are, also from your experience, on one side the opportunities, but on the other side also the difficulties or constraints of working with an institution as opposed to other less institutional contexts? What do you feel it's, what the institution can offer, in your view, to a younger artist, and what is also sometimes the pressure that you feel in that context?
I mean, it's great that the Kunsthalle system supports like young artists and give them some visibility. I think this is really great, and I don't know. I mean, it's, I don't know. It's really. It's also, you have to get to this point that you get invited to an institutional show or a group show, and then out of this generating something which you can go on. And of course, it's a pressure. So but it's always a pressure if you do a show anywhere, I think. So I mean, I think the system is really good that this is existing.
There are these opportunities.
Yes, of course, yeah.
And it's interesting what you just mentioned about the risks that you are taking in proposing something new, because a lot of what this kind of institution does is also commissioning new work, especially when you work with younger artists. The big opportunity is also to have a chance to produce something new. So the curator there does not only work in selection of existing works, and doing an exhibition is a totally different process. It's also about commissioning something that doesn't exist. So there's a lot of risk-taking, no, a courage on the part of the institution. So I wonder, how is your curatorial approach in that?
My position is very simple. I had a fight once with one of the people in the board of the Kunst because I clearly say that the Kunst is a money-burning machine. I really persuaded that we don't have to generate money. Of course, we generate a sort of value if we show artists in our spaces, in our context. But we try. We don't have any commercial meaning in what we are doing. Of course, there are interests. We are not naive, and some of the things we produce maybe lands in the market, maybe they just land in a bin. I don't care, personally. And the risk, I mean, we're talking about very, very comfortable risks that we are taking, because, of course, when we show somebody, me or other people, of course we believe in the work and we want to show the work. We want to work with this person or those persons. We want to give visibility to the work. We want that the public discuss about the work. That's what we try to do. And then the risk is really little, in the sense, the risk is that maybe the work doesn't generate any echo or any kind of feedback, and this is like the worst thing that can happen, actually.
But when I asked you about your curatorial approach, I was also curious about the way you feel a kind of responsibility in helping the artists. I mean, when you work with very young artists, you might feel that, also giving your experience, they might need or like to be, in a way, supported also in the process of conceiving, of, being helped in a context that they don't know in advance, or it's something new.
Of course, a certain experience in curating or like helping to produce project gives me maybe some instrument that younger artist doesn't have, and then it's always a discussion. I think we are not a school, and at the end is always the responsibility of the artist what is showing or she is showing. For me, it's very clear. The last decision, it's always the artist's decision, but they found in us or in me a kind of sparring partner, or like the tennis ball. They send the ball and I send the ball back, or maybe sometimes I eat the ball. No, but it's our role is just like to give them the most perfect condition to develop their work, and that's what we try to do mainly with young artists. I mean, a couple of weeks ago we started to produce a film for the next exhibition we are doing. It was a complicated film to organize with a lot of people that we need to organize. And there was the filming of the film, of the project. And at the end, we decided, we looked at the material, and it's kind of a lot of money involved in that, or sort of a lot of money for us. And we just decided we're not going to show the film because the material is not good. And that was supposed to be like the main point of an exhibition starting in the mid of August, but it's just like not working, and that's part of the risk. If you produce new things, you don't know at the end if they are good enough to be inserted in this context. That means that maybe this material will be used by the artist in another context, whatever. That's fine. I mean, we are here also to try out things. The Kunsthalle, our Kunsthalle, and probably a lot of other Kunsthalle are places where you can test. There are laboratories, like in the science. Scientists also try out things, and sometimes doesn't work. It's part of the process of learning what is art here for, why are we doing art.
Now, what is your experience and also expectations when you are invited to produce something new? Do you expect, in a way, the curator of the institution to accompany you in the process? You are interested in that kind of dialogue, or is your, way of working, your methodology, not interested in and relevant for you to engage into that kind of dialogue? Do you expect what kind of support?
I mean, it's of course really important to talk with each other, to develop something new, and also to, that's what you said about commission new works in Kunsthalle is really something good, because you don't have the pressure of this getting into the finance system of art, maybe, because you can do whatever you want together with the curator or people who work with you on a project. So I think it's really important to talk with each other. Also that's why I'm also running an artist space in Zurich called Taylor Macklin, and that's also a practice to develop projects with people, with other artists or other curators, where you can talk about new ideas, or try to develop things what is out of the commercial kind of art system, maybe. Yeah. So
that's very interesting. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your program and what you do, because I think it's also very interesting the way more and more artists are creating, parallel contexts which create opportunity for young artists, maybe of the same generation, and also, create occasion of visibility, but it's also strongly linked to artist production. In a way, it's a parallel way of producing meaning and content. So would you like to tell us a little bit more about what you do? And
we started this space because there was not really places in Zurich to show things, and it came out of the need of doing exhibition together. So we got funded by the school first 2 years, which was great, and they supported us really generosity. So the art school of Zurich, and then we apply for funding of the city and the canton, and we live out of this. But it's it's just actually, we invite people, local people, and we invite international people, but also people we admire or people we find interesting, or sometimes also people we are just friends and find their work needs to be shown. So it's also to create a scene and talk together, and like this. So
may I interrupt you? This is exactly the same way the Kunsthalle was born. Kunsthalle Sankt was born because there was no place where to show, and was born through artists that needed a place where they could discuss and meet and so on. At a certain point, the question is, do you want to become more institutional or not? Which all the consequences brings with. Maybe as an artist, maybe you should decide, want to be a curator or want to be an artist at a certain point, or concentrate more on curating or more on... So that's talking about like this development of young artists. So it's also young spaces
growing up. Yeah, I can see. Usually there is a lifespan of these projects. No, they have a time that I can see them. Changing context in a very different context, like Italy, where I come from. More and more artists are establishing these kind of spaces, and they really, again, they are covering an emptiness. They are creating opportunities where there aren't so many. And most of the time, there's a lot of activity there and a lot of spaces are born, and then maybe they end their activities. They don't last for long, but in that period is very significant what they do. And for speaking of different contexts, of course, I think it's relevant to mention that according to the places we are talking about, there are very different opportunities for young artists. I mean, we were just talking about this, that for Swiss artists is a different thing than, for example, Italian artists, unfortunately. But this also brings us to this idea that there's also a system of support of young artists that is linked to the idea of nationality. Many opportunities are linked to being either resident or being born in a specific context. So, for example, one of these cases is prizes, awards that are usually linked to national identity. I'm interested in knowing your opinion about this as an opportunity, which are the models that work well, but also, like the shortcomings of this initiative, partly relating to national identity, which is maybe something that nowadays is losing, its relevance, but also in terms of course, stressing the idea of competition, rivalry, hierarchies. So these notions that maybe are not so, positive in a sense. What do you think? Who's first?
I mean, the support system of Switzerland is crazy, maybe, which is great. I would not say too much. I mean, it's great that it exists. I should not say too much. But I mean, for me, it was the best. I mean, the residency program support system, I think it's the best what you can have as a young artist, to go out of your place you're coming from and see other new places to develop new works. I mean, for me, my life changed when I was 1 year in Rome, and I could be there and work. Just, you have time and you have money and you have a place to stay, and you don't have to look too much for your income in that time, which creates a lot of freedom, and you can just concentrate what you want to do and also meet new people. So, but I don't know. I mean, there is also negative. I mean, the hierarchies, I don't know, but there is a competition. What happens under us sometimes? Then somebody gets a prize and the other doesn't get a prize, and I think it's also not. It's a lottery, also in a way. Who gets what somehow? I don't know.
So first of all, I would say there is a lot in Switzerland, but it's not enough. We want more, and and not only in Switzerland, as far as possible. I think it's very important to sustain culture in general for state and for private, to allow other things to happen and not only economical driven thinking. There is, maybe you know, maybe you don't know, I'm chairing the Swiss Art Awards, and which is, by the way, open till 6 o'clock, and you should go and see it, where Gina has a work. Gina didn't got the award, so probably Gina is very upset and angry with me. But Gina knows that there is, I mean, it's a competition, of course, and there are like 50 or 45 artists showing, and only 8 or 9 prizes given, which is already something good, and it's something very important. We structure the thing in a way that any artist showing there at least gets production money to show. So as a little, at least a sign, also an institutional kind of sign that you make things happen, you sustain, you give us sort of salary to the artist, and then 8 or 9 of them get a bit more money with which they can maybe live 1 year, or they can buy new material, they can do whatever they want. He said, when you are in this kind of juries and so on, you feel the responsibility, you know that it's an important decision you're taking, and so you discuss also seriously, and it's a very complicated system and complex system, because since, I mean, at least talking about the Swiss Art Awards, which are open for everybody, they have to be open for everybody, obviously, because it's state money, so everybody can participate.
It's an open call in the
It's an
first
open
place.
call. There are some rules, like how many times you can participate and so on, but basically it's open also in the order of age, so there are like professors in the art schools which are applying, and they are showing at the same moment with their students, and maybe the students get the prize and the professors not. So this generates, of course, kind of frictions, maybe let's call them frictions, but it's interesting, it's a discussion, and of course a jury make a choice, which another jury, if another person will be part of the jury, will be obviously being different. So that's why also this kind of jury are changing every year, so in order that they're not like this sort of discussion which are established and fixed and always the same discussions. So we try to be as objective as possible, knowing that we are human and we are not artificial intelligence. So,
how do you feel about this issue of nationality? You feel that it's something really outdated, that we should overcome?
I don't want to be too positive about what we are doing, but nationality doesn't play really a role, in the sense you don't need to be Swiss to participate to the Swiss Art Awards, but you need to be connected to the Swiss scene. So there are a lot of students coming from France which are studying in Geneva that participate to the Swiss Art Awards. Still a very wide competition, if I can say like this, but it's a kind of, we try to reflect what is happening in the society. This issue of nationality, it's always a problem, but when there is state money involved, you can avoid totally the discussion, and it's the same thing in Venice with the pavilions and so on, which are always trying to.
Every time there's the same discussion against it.
We cannot solve the problem in the art world, but we can start to send out signals in the direction we would like the things are going.
I think it also has to do with how much a system is healthy, in any aspect, because it's not only about the awards, it's about the institutions, about all the actors in a system. So when a system is able to support, the younger generations, is also, stronger outside, no? Not only in terms of awards devoted to national artists, but in general, creating opportunities for visibility, and that's really important. I'd like to go back to this thing you mentioned about residencies, because that's also another important way to support artists, and it's in a way it's something that happens at different stages of artists' career, because of course there are also residency for established artists, but that is seriously an important part, because it affects not only promotion and visibility, but occasions to produce something new. I was interested in your experience in different contexts. What do you think are the most interesting aspects of a residency? Because it doesn't have to do just with mobility, because nowadays that's quite accessible. Artists move and they move city and so on. But what were, to you, the most important aspects, apart from, of course, the money that you mentioned?
Yeah, that you kind of see that that your own world is getting bigger, or the few, like the people you know, you get that where you are, it's not the middle of the world. So you go in a new city, and then you see that there is another situation, and there is other people, and and it's not the. It's getting less, I don't know, for example, when I left Switzerland for going to Rome, then the Swiss scene was getting less and less important because I had new people, new influence, and I also realized it's not the middle of the world. So you kind of, you just open your mind in new direction, and I think the social moment for me was one of the most important, or it's for me one of the most important and most beautiful experience I could do, because I had the chance to meet new people, and I don't know, in different cities. I was also in Berlin and in Marseille, and it was really good also for my work, because you have just other influence, and it's also good that then you feel that the place where you're coming from, it's not the middle of the world, somehow, or for me, as I think it's the most interesting thing.
There are also interesting programs to attract people here. I mean, there are opportunities for residency in the region, or in...
There are some. I'm not the total expert of it, but there are not so many. And I personally receive a lot of requests from artists that I know from abroad that are asking me, I'd like to come to Switzerland for a residency where I can watch and who I could ask. This is something that I'll be happy. There will be more possibility for artists from abroad to come here, but it's, of course, not complicated also, very complicated also, because there are not many, already Swiss artists have difficulties to find studios, more and more.
I want to leave them to other people from outside.
Now, to find the infrastructure to organize like serious artisan residency for artists from abroad, it's difficult, and it's always the context. It's also a topic. I mean, we had a little program in St. Gallen with artists from the Middle East coming through Pro Helvetia to St. Gallen, and it was a little bit complicated because there were also people which were used to a total different kind of urban context. Let's put it like this. Than being in more or less in the middle of the mountains, a little bit far away from bigger cities like Zurich or Basel or Geneva, maybe. So,
but in Zurich, there is no residency program from people from outside, I think, for example, which I also find a bit weird. That I mean, I don't know who should invent that, but maybe the Zurich city, I don't know, could be a proposal. I think it would be great for Zurich that people come from outside.
Of course, this is a political decision, and this is what I was telling. We can send signal outside, but there are like decisions from top down which are more difficult to find. I mean, Switzerland is not very welcoming towards foreigners, like to getting people getting in. So in general,
of course, it also enriches the context. For example, in Turin, since a few years, we established a program of exchanges. So the residency platform is supposed to always have, one people going out, one person going out, one person coming in. And so we established this partnership with specific contexts abroad and in specific countries like Egypt, Brazil, India, Cali, Colombia. So contexts which are not used to this kind of, they're not sending them just to a center of contemporary art, but also, of course, challenging contexts, because it's not easy to go.
What I think it's very important is when you get like an artist coming, is that you give them the possibility, you take care of them very much. So you get them in contact with the scene, with curators coming, visiting, with other artists, in order, and maybe the possibility to show the work. So that's then a residency becomes something which is consistent. On the other end, residencies has probably like an influence on the work over like middle term and so on, because of encounters, because of new cultural stimuli that you got or whatever.
Some of them also require producing something, but not all of them. And I spoke with many artists who were saying that they definitely prefer the ones that where they don't have a pressure to produce immediately, because otherwise it's a way of reacting, being forced to react to a specific context. But surely, for example, in Rome, the system of the art academies, which host different programs and exchanges with other countries, are really, really important for the cultural life of the city. So it's really, they're adding another scene. It's a temporary one. I mean, not so temporary, because 1 year time, it's significant already. So it's also important for a system. Changing topic, we were also discussing about the new importance of digital system, digital tools and platforms to promote the art of younger generation. Of course, it's something new, and it's something which is gaining more and more importance. How do you feel it's changing? Also the opportunities and selection processes, how does it influence your work? This
You don't have to go to see shows anymore. I mean, I don't know if it's good or bad, but there is you can see everything on a photograph. So I don't know.
But I mean, for self-promotion also for younger artists, is this something that is working in terms of new enlarged space of visibility?
Well, I mean, there are different levels. If we're talking about social media, it's like a possible promotion tool, like there are websites and so on. And yeah, what you say, it's true. You don't have to go and see stuff. There are institutions which are not putting images of the exhibition on purpose. I mean, people in the art world should know that what is the difference between an original and an image, so they could be able to think, okay, maybe I go anyway to see, even if I saw it online. But what is maybe more interesting there is that there are a lot of artists which are starting to work in the digital world, like substantially, and this is another space which is invested by the art or the artists, and this is a space which is, for instance, maybe the new place to be, or the upcoming place to be, or the place that needs new promotion, new kind of institution, or and so on.
For example, also there is existing these blogs where putting all these art show or exhibitions on there, and also there is existing a hierarchy, because if you send, I don't know, we just have it with our space, because sometimes we have artists who ask us to put the shows, send it to Contemporary Art Daily or Art Viewer or whatever existing. So then you send it to them, or they ask you if you can send it, but then they also choose or not choose. So it's always like, it's like sometimes for people it's a really hostile that they didn't get chosen to. That's what was my experience with project we did with other artists together, that some were not picked and then you are not there, so it's a problem for them sometimes. I don't know. And sometimes I find this a bit weird. I'm not sure if it's so good that there is so many art shows online somehow. And it's also the disease of having the pictures already before the show's open of a show which is still running or just for 4 hours open. I think it's a bit, this I dislike, because the experience as a body in a space, it's kind of important, I think, for seeing art.
There is a tendency, I had some discussion about this with younger curators or so on, that they conceive exhibition in order to be photogenic. And this is a problem, of course, and it's a bit a very short thinking thing. And on the other end, I'm not convinced that I'm happy that there are a lot of stuff online, and that I can have the possibility at least to have an idea about things happening, whatever, in London, Lahore, or Kigali, whatever. So, but I mean, what we have to be aware of the fact that, yeah, exactly what I was telling before, there is a difference between the original experience of being in a space with an artwork, with other people, it's very substantially different of watching even a video on your computer, or an extra to a video on your computer. So, yeah, complicated times.
Yeah, no, as you said, but of course, like, the selection process is influenced by the way a specific kind of works behaves.
And of the fact digital, if you put publicity or not on these sites. I mean, it's not only for free.
I think we can maybe open now to questions if there are from the public.
The question is for you. Yes, because you mentioned that the foundation is giving residences to different countries, as you mentioned, India and Brazil. But also you mentioned a city that we never hear, and I would like to know more about your experience with Cali, Colombia. That I know that city years ago has extraordinary foundations like Urrutia and some others, and the energy of that place. So please tell me more about your experience with artists from Cali, Colombia, and how was this exchange, and why you are interested in that particular place.
Yeah, the program I mentioned, it's a city program. Fondazione Sandretto Rebaudengo, where I work, is not directly dealing with the residency program. We have residency program, but just for curators. Anyways, the city program in Turin is called RESO, and it's a network of institutions which work in the city, which established a relationship with a series of other institutions in other countries, including Cali, with whom we have an exchange. So we send artists from Turin to these different contexts, and artists from there come to Turin. So the idea is that, I mean, there's an exchange, and there's a possibility for the artists. It's not a long program. The residencies last for around 3 weeks, 1 month usually, and so each time there's this sort of I would say, yes, strong experience, both in the artists going from Turin to Cali. I mean, of course, experiencing a very different context and a very specific, art system, and as well for the artists coming from there, who, are, experiencing the local art system, get in touch with the local artists, are not necessarily asked to create a piece, but usually that happens as a sort of restitution. And the program, as I said, is called Réseau, and it had 3 times a year open calls for all the artists from the different regions to participate. So this I cannot answer, I'm sorry, because I'm not really involved in the project, so I don't have specific details to give you, but I can share with you the information on the program, and you'll find a lot of documentation on that. Other questions? Okay then, so
Thank you.
thank you for your
Have a nice
attention.
Sunday.